It's gonna be one of those other long minutes. Oh. Good evening. It is Tuesday, February 21st, and welcome to the City of Ellensburg City Council meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Nguyen.
Indivisible.
Thank you. Will the clerk please take the roll? Beauchamp. Here. Elliott.
Here.
Goodlow.
Here.
Lowquist. Here. David Miller.
I'm here.
Monica Miller. Here. Nguyen.
Here.
Okay, we have one proclamation this evening, and we have a guest, Ruth Ann Stacy, to read it. Ruth Ann, if you come up to the microphone, please. So this is a National Women's History Month and International Women's Day proclamation.
City of Ellensburg proclamation for National Women's History Month and International Women's Day, March 2023. Whereas President Jimmy Carter signed a 1981 presidential proclamation designating the week of March 8th as National Women's History Week. And whereas the 1987 United States Congress passed Public Law 100-9, declaring the month of March as National Women's History Month. And whereas the goal of National Women's History Month is an intentioned time period to honor and celebrate women's often overlooked social, economic, and cultural contributions to American history. And whereas International Women's Day, first recognized by the United Nations in 1977, is a vital part of National Women's History Month. And whereas International Women's Day is an annual global celebration of all women and their contributions to the cultural, social, economic, and political structures of this world, as well as recommitment from all nations to a peaceful, diverse, equitable, and inclusive world. And whereas the City of Ellensburg recognizes and honors all of the women past and present and their significant efforts in making Ellensburg a strong and vibrant Central Washington city. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Ellensburg does hereby proclaim March 2023 as Women's History Month and March 8th, 2023 as International Women's Day in Ellensburg. We are grateful to all women who support this community through their daily activities, and we encourage all residents to honor, celebrate, and thank these women for their efforts. Signed this 21st day of February, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Stacy. We have no other awards or recognition, so the consent agenda is before you.
Madam Mayor, I move,
Approve the agenda first. I'm sorry.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
You do vote aye. We have Rich to keep me honest.
All about numbers.
Consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I also move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Can I just quickly acknowledge the fact that we do have several members of the Kittitas County Pride in house tonight supporting, and thank you for passing that for their parade route for the Pride Festival.
That was easy. You just.
I just wanted to
Say
acknowledge that they
anything.
were here in support.
Thank you. Just for the audience, that was item 5J on the consent agenda, so it passed without discussion. The next item is 6A, the Yakima Basin Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board presentation. And our guest is Alex Conley, who's the director of that board. I have served on that board for a long time, since I think 2006 and its predecessors before that. And I realized that there are several new council people who probably don't know what this board is about. And so Alex offered to come provide this presentation, and so we welcome him tonight.
And thank you for the chance to be here tonight. And just start out with a question following up on Nancy's introduction. How many people feel like they have a pretty good handle what the board is, and how many are going, what is this?
I know.
Okay. So my name's Alex Conley. I'm executive director of the Yakima Basin Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board. And we are an interesting organization in terms of how we're set up and created. So I'm going to first just introduce the organization, how it links to the city of Ellensburg, and then talk a bit about the work we do and how, again, that crosses over with things you're working on as a city. So board was created in 2006. It actually consolidated two previously existing boards. So a lot of different local government representatives who were meeting with one board in Zilla, another board in Ciela, said, these are both dealing with salmon recovery. Why do we have two separate boards, different administrative contracts, et cetera? They proposed combining them into one board, and you'll see here, it was formed by an interlocal agreement between 22 local governments, the Yakima Nation, 3 counties, Kittitas, Yakima, and Benton, and 18 city governments. That represents all but, I believe, 4 of the cities in the Yakima Basin. None of the cities were opposed. The ones that never signed on tended to be smaller cities like Para, who just never brought it to their agenda. So that interlocal agreement, which of course Ellensburg was one of the organizations signing, created us essentially as a special district. No taxing authority, but created under that state law that allows local jurisdictions to create interlocal organizations. The mission of the board, it's a mouthful, like many a consensus-derived mission, but you'll see 2 key pieces here. It's to restore sustainable and harvestable populations of salmon, steelhead, bull trout, and other at-risk fish and wildlife species. That's the first half. The second half, through collaborative, economically sound efforts that bring together diverse resources to promote wise resource management of the Yakima Basin. So to put it in fewer words, we're about recovering at-risk fish and wildlife species, especially those on the Endangered Species Act, in ways that the communities here in the Yakima Basin feel works for these communities. So those are really the 2 parts of our mission. The board's first action after being created was creating a nonprofit organization. And I was hired shortly after as the first executive director of that nonprofit organization. And like any nonprofit, it's governed by a board of directors. It's a 10-member board of directors. So we had 20-something member governments. Each county has a seat, Yakima Nation has a seat, and then there are 2 seats for cities from each of the counties, and a process by which the members from that county work together each year in the annual meeting to nominate people for those seats. And the city of Ellensburg has had a seat the whole time we've been in existence. And Nancy is one of, I think, 2 original board members that's still on the board. So she's been a real stalwart with us. The primary representatives have to be elected officials, again, different than most nonprofit organizations. But they can appoint staff alternates to act in their place. And what was unique about our board at the time is it's the first place the local governments in the Yakima Nation came together and committed to consensus decision-making. Some of you may remember watershed planning and some other efforts that hit political tangles. After some of those said, no, we're not making decisions if one of our members isn't present, and we're going to make our decisions by consensus. I like to think that this was one of the places where people forged the cooperation that I think is much more common now than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And the board the operations of the nonprofit are funded primarily by contracts with the state through the Recreation and Conservation Office. And if you scratch those, they're a mix of federal monies from the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund that come to the state and the state's funds for the Salmon Recovery Funding Board program. So created by local governments, run as a nonprofit, funded by state and federal funds. So we get a little bit of everything in that mix. Here's the membership. I won't go through in detail. You can see Nancy there for City of Ellensburg, Jay McGowan from Clay Elum, Brett Watchsmith from the county here. This is determined each year at our annual meeting. So if anyone wants to challenge Nancy, bring it to us in August. In terms of what we do program wise, I've got 4 basic things up here. Acting as a lead entity for the Yakima Basin, developing and implementing recovery plans, coordinating monitoring, and conducting outreach. So what the heck is a lead entity? The SURF Board is the acronym for the Salmon Recovery Funding Board. It was the state's response in 1999 to all the salmon listings. And it created a source of funding, some from state bond funds, some from the federal government, to people that wanted to do projects that would help recover salmon, steelhead, bull trout around the state. The state did not set up a centralized grant program. Instead, they contracted out with groups to be lead entities for local areas. So we have the contract to be the lead entity for the Yakima Basin. That's about 10% of the state. Each year, we just put out last month our RFP for grants. It's typically been about $1 million to $2 million a year that we're able to allocate. Last year it was 12. We put out that RFP. People apply to us. We review the projects against the recovery plans I'll talk about soon. But really, the selection is done by a technical committee. That's all the ologists, biologists, hydrologists, others from organizations working in the basin. And then it goes through another layer of review by a citizens committee. And that's 16 members of the public selected 4 each from the 3 counties in the Yakima Nation through our board. So by the time that projects have come through the filter we set up, you know they're biologically sound. People really believe these are going to do something real for the salmon. And they have the review and support of local communities. If there's something that's really problematic, it won't make it through that review. The board approves that list each year. We send it on to the SURF Board, and the nice part for us is we really get to help allocate those funds. We send them a ranked list, and they contract with each of the project sponsors directly. So we are not dealing with the pass-through of all that money. We're just really allocating it. It was a big step for the state. It's really one of the only places other than some of the transportation funding where you see that delegated authority for those big statewide programs. So that's the nuts of the lead entity program. I largely covered this already. I should watch my slides. But what does this turn into on the ground? We've seen 170 projects funded since it started in '99. I won't worry about the details here. I did grab a map around the city of Ellensburg, and it was an interesting one. We have done a ton of projects over on the Kittitas side of the valley on a lot of the creeks there. We've done projects, some just into city limits on Reeser Creek. That was a big project with the city. On Lower Wilson, we've done projects going around just to the west of the city, a lot across the river, but not that much right in town. As you know, the creeks in town, this is a funny place, and the creeks divide up and re-meet up again, and the fish focus has really been on the creeks just to the east and west of town, leaving that question, maybe we can come back to later, about, you know, what are the fisheries goals for Wilson or Mercer Creek? But generally, we've been focused on Nanum and Wilson. So this map was funny when I said, wow, there are just a few there in city limits. This is a picture of the Reeser Creek project. That was the biggest project we've done directly with the city as sponsor from the air. And this is the new channel route as it looked not that long after it went in. And it's been really neat to see all that native vegetation coming in, to see it connected to the parkland, and to see the levee setback that hopefully has been successfully cutting down the flooding into West Ellensburg there. This was a big project, but was one of those we love to see. It definitely helps the fish. It's got community benefits and recreation. It's flood reduction. These are the kinds of projects that we're really excited to be able to propose to the SURF Board for funding. So that's our SURF Board role. The planning role, Sub-basin planning is where we started, and that's when BPA said, we want local entities to write a plan for the fish mitigation program that Bonneville Power runs. We did that in the early 2000s, and then as this species were listed, we ended up getting engaged in Endangered Species Act recovery planning. So when a species is listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act, the agency in charge, which for salmon is generally NOAA Fisheries, has to write a recovery plan. And traditionally out here, that would have been done by a biologist in Portland, and it would have been put on a shelf after. The state of Washington brokered with NOAA and said, hey, how about NOAA, you provide us some federal funding. We will pass that on to groups that bring together local partners like the Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board that bring in local governments, local stakeholders. We'll ask them to write recovery plans for their areas. You get to say whether or not it meets your standards, NOAA, and then we'll roll that all up into a federal recovery plan. So just like with the grant program, it's a delegation of authority. We haven't seen that often, a federal agency saying, we trust this local entity with our support and our ability to veto things we don't think are technically sound to write a recovery plan. We spent a lot of years writing the Yakima Basin Steelhead Recovery Plan, back and forth between biologists, irrigation districts, local governments, other stakeholders, saying, hey, what do we need to do to get this fish off the Endangered Species Act? What are our goals? Instead of saying, oh, we'll know when it's delisted, we'll just keep moving the bar on you. We set actual criteria, this many fish in these places, and then we can talk about delisting. And these are the actions we think we need to do to get there. So was the Steelhead Recovery Plan. It doesn't, of course, cover the Columbia River, the ocean, so it's all rolled up with NOAA fisheries on those things we can't control in the basin, but it sets a lot of goals for what we do in the Yakima. We also did a full trout action plan. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service didn't want to delegate the recovery plan to the authority, but they wanted us to write a plan they could plagiarize, so we called it an action plan, and then they used chunks of it in their recovery plan. So a lot of planning in our first 5 or 6 years. Since then, we've really focused on implementing the plans. We don't do projects. If we're going to be the ones running the process to allocate the surfboard funding, we don't want to our own project competing with other people in the basin. What we do is help identify projects, help find, be a matchmaker, connecting sponsors with projects that need to be done with funding, with political support. We really try and make sure we're also updating the priorities in the plan. We got done what we said we would. Do we have new needs that have been identified? How are we doing on those goals and the plans? That, of course, means monitoring. And again, we don't do a lot of monitoring ourselves. Our role has been really trying to encourage the monitoring and trying to pull together the data, compare it to our plans and say, are we making progress? Are the fish numbers approaching our goals? Are we doing the projects we said we would at the scale we would? We need to change course. This has been a big part of our mission in the past, and it's one right now I feel like we really need to return to and pick up. We followed fish numbers. We felt really good for a while, and they've been a little not so great lately, and we really have to make sure we're doing the right things. We can make lots of habitat for young fish. If we can't get them to the ocean, well, that's a problem. So we need the science to know where we need to be targeting. And then outreach. Both shooting our own horn as an organization, but more importantly, highlighting the work that all the partners in salmon recovery in the Yakima Basin are doing. That's digital outreach, website and Facebook presentations like tonight, educational events, project tours, legislative outreach, making sure people in Olympia are hearing from people who are working to advocate for salmon, but also very sensitive to the needs of communities outside of the greater Seattle world. So it's always fun to go over to Olympia and hear people say, okay, tell us how salmon recovery works on the east side, and we get a good reception. We do have an outreach event coming up just this week, so I will pass around a flyer for this is actually something that we set a goal in our work plan of doing a workshop in each of our 3 counties, and Nancy proposed that Kittitas County go first, and when we started talking with her and others here about issues, it was really the intersection of floodplain management and salmon recovery. And what do I do if I have a stream through my property? How do I deal with flood risks? What can I do for fish and wildlife? So come to our workshop Thursday night. And we'll have a good panel discussion from people from a bunch of different agencies and nonprofits, and a lot of chance to visit one-on-one with people about their own questions, their properties or issues. So it should be a good event, and it's been a great team pulling it together. That's an example of our outreach. Other things, connections with the city of Ellensburg. I mentioned earlier, a lot of the salmon recovery work has sort of circled the city. In the long haul, that question, what are or aren't goals for Wilson and Mercer Creek, is a real one. I don't have any answers for you right now today, but it's certainly one of those discussions. A big place for the city, of course, are your utilities. So maintaining permits for the wastewater plant, the spray fields, all of that work in conjunction with the Bureau, that's been a big intersection where your interests as a city have crossed with salmon recovery generally, and our recovery plans. Stormwater management, actually, I would say Ellensburg's been really proactive in it, and it's been great to see that. Riparian critical area management in town. I know you went through revisions just recently, and flood management. Again, when we can find projects like Risa Creek that are fish and wildlife benefit and reducing flood risk in developed areas, those mixed benefit projects are gold. And nearby recreation opportunities. There's a lot of work going on right now just adjacent to the city that allows trails from the city to connect down to the river, even maybe in the future, the canyon. So lots of areas, I think, where your interest as a city government cross with salmon recovery generally, and hopefully we can be a useful resource for you as you talk about those. So I'll end there just with a huge thanks to the city and to Nancy, and open up to any questions.
Any questions? For Alex? Seeing none. Is there anyone from the audience who wants to comment on this agenda item? Seeing no one.
Any thoughts or questions from Nancy? From your seat at our
Well,
table.
come to the flood workshop. It really is shaping up to be a good discussion, I think. So it is Thursday night, the 23rd at 5 doors open at 5 p.m. The actual presentations from 5:30 to 6:30. And the staff of like the flood control zone district and city staff will hang around, answer questions, because as they keep saying, it's all local, it's all parcel specific. There's no one answer you can give, a blanket yes or no, or this is what you should do. It is all look at the property and the stream and what's going on, and have a conversation. So it's an opportunity to do that. Oh. So I'm just going to repeat what you said because you're getting a red card from Drew. So Alex is handing out a booklet of all of the projects that have been funded through this program, the support program in Yakima Basin, and just sharing that. So
I have a question.
sure.
Since it is so specific to property, is there a list of properties that are impacted by this? And has there been specific efforts to reach out to those properties? Feels like that would make this the most effective.
Yeah. Getting that list of everyone who lives on a stream was a little daunting. It turned out, I mean, that was my initial idea, is just, so we have, tried to use the, social media. There was an article today in today's, newspaper. I distributed some flyers around town. And the city has, posted it through their, our media channels, as have the county and, the other partners. So
If we know anybody.
if you know anyone who lives on a stream, yeah,
Propose waiting for the streams to come up a little and making lots of paper boats out of the flyers. And pick the right landowners that way.
did have one question.
Go ahead.
Wait around long enough, I can think something. So thank you for the presentation. You mentioned your annual funding levels for projects typically is in the $1 to $2 million range. And I think I heard you say this last year you had 12 million available. Well, could you, not in a great amount of detail, but could you give us a little idea where that money came from?
90% of that additional money came from the state supplemental budget. So we went through COVID where funding was really contracted and then revenues did quite well. So we came into the supplemental and there was a fair bit of funding, and salmon recovery was, along with a lot of other issues like homeless, one of the focal areas. So there was a big push. I think statewide, it was 85 million for salmon recovery that went through the state CERC board. And if you do the math there, that means the Yakima Basin received well more than our geographic share. I think we competed quite well for that. So that's where that came from, was the state legislature and the supplemental budget. A little bit of it was infrastructure money.
Okay.
And there's more infrastructure money coming now, but
And as I recall, that was to target large projects that normally we can't fund.
it was a mix. So part of it was for regular sized projects, but yeah, they specifically said one of the pots of funding we worked with last year was limited to projects over 5 million. Which, at least for the projects we're doing, was pretty big. It may not be big for a road project anymore, but for us, that was a pretty unique opportunity.
So so the infrastructure, by that, do you mean the bill money,
Yeah.
federal? So, okay, we're seeing a lot of that money.
Yeah.
Floating around.
No,
Sounds
and
good.
figuring out how to land it and through which
Mhm.
programs, it's keeping us busy. Let's just say people wrote a lot of grants last year, not just the money that came through us, but everything else coming down. And we've been talking a lot with folks about, this is awesome, but how do we streamline it and make sure it lands on the right projects?
Anyone else? Thank you for coming up,
Yeah, no, thank you
and
for the
we'll
opportunity.
see you Thursday. Next item is board and commission appointments. I am told that Linda Warren has withdrawn her application. So we would have, is it Melina Meter?
Melina?
Melina? Let's see. For the library board, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Hi,
Josephine,
good
hi,
evening,
thank you.
Council, Madam Mayor. Josephine Camarillo, Library Director. Gives me great pleasure to be here tonight to introduce our new library board member. We had an opening, and on February 8th, we had our selection panel conducted interviews of 3 candidates, and one came to the top. And luckily, when we offered the position, she accepted, and I'm here tonight to introduce our new library board member, Melina Meter.
Yes, good evening. I'm Melina Metter. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. It's a real pleasure to be here. I haven't been to one of these in a long time. So yes, I am a resident of Ellensburg. I've been here almost 11 years and I love Ellensburg. I love everything about it. And I'm so glad I live here, and I love our library. In every place I've lived, which has only been like 5, let's be honest. But every place I've lived, I've always gotten a library card within the first week of moving there because I love libraries. I love how our library in particular is not just about books and staff and helping you get what you need and the information, but it's such a vital part of our community. I can't believe, so I have 3 young children. My husband and I are busy parents, and going to the library is a highlight of our family's life for sure. We check out books. We have many overdue books currently, don't look. But just going there, seeing other people using the facility, how it is, how Holmes gets used, which is obviously part of the city. And I'm just a big fan. So I am really, really, really glad to get to be a part of the board and just be curious and yeah, be a part of the good things that are already going on. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for stepping up, and
Yeah,
I
you're welcome.
apologize for
Oh,
destroying your name.
I got a weird name. That's all right. Thank you so much. Is that it?
And we need a motion.
Madam Mayor, move to approve the board, library board's appointment of Melina Menor.
Second.
Board member.
Motion and second to appoint Melina. I'm sorry,
Metter.
Metter, to the library board. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we are at citizen comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, but the city does have some control over? You would have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Stephanie Hinchliff, and I am working on bringing YMCA to Ellensburg and Lower County. I'm working with a friend who has been trying to work on it for a while, and it's just something that I had thought of a long time ago, but we just didn't have the population. But with the growing county, we now can meet the population minimum for a YMCA. Right now, what needs to happen is we are looking for a partner Y, and we need to form a 501c3, and we are looking to build a committee for it. So, and that's everything that we're working on right now. I started a Facebook page. It has over 700, nearly 800 members of it so far. I made it private, and I'm approving members every day. And it's got a lot of public support, and it's just something that I believe in as far as the why and what they stand for and what they work toward. And I believe that we're growing, we're getting bigger, and a YMCA will help us control where that growth happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. What's the name of your Facebook page?
The name of the Facebook page is Y Ellensburg,
The letter Y.
the letter Y and Ellensburg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? There is one person online. Matt Larson.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. My name is Matt Larson. I'm the new local government affairs representative with Puget Sound Energy, and perhaps my comment can be answered quickly by Heidi. We had met with some of the staff, or Heidi and the staff, on Friday, we had a rush timeline trying to get some grant monies from the federal government. It was approved late last week, and we were wanting to get that before you folks for approval. I didn't see it on the agenda, and I didn't hear it added to the agenda when you approved the agenda. So maybe Heidi could just answer the question as to whether we're all set or if there's anything else you need from me.
Matt, that letter is on, everyone has it in front of them, and the city manager, Baron Cernaway, was going to ask for approval in her city manager's report at the end of the meeting.
Perfect. Okay, then I apologize for my interruption. Thank you.
No problem. It was nice to meet you.
You too. I look forward to meeting you all.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. There are no public hearings tonight, so we are at second reading and adoption of ordinance 4910, amending the Ellensburg Comprehensive Plan.
That would be me.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm filling in for Director Ailing tonight to do the second reading, so hopefully I can do okay for you. What we have tonight is the second reading and adoption of ordinance 4910, amending the Ellensburg Comprehensive Plan. Director Ailing conducted the first reading of the proposed amendments on February 6, 2023, at which time all docket requests were approved as presented. As he went fairly in depth with these, for the first reading, I'll give a more brief overview reminder today. In your packet was Exhibit A, which is a compilation of the approved 6-year capital improvement plans. And Exhibit B, text amendments to the comp plan and future land use map. So at the July 18th, 2022 meeting, City Council approved a motion to docket 5 of the 6 submitted comprehensive plan amendments. All docketed amendment proposals must be considered by the city concurrently, so the cumulative effect of the various proposals can be evaluated. The city issued a SEPA determination of non-significance on February 3rd, 2023. And the required 60-day notice of intent to adopt comprehensive plan amendments was submitted on October 24th, 2022. So just as a quick reminder, this covered docket item 22-01, which was an update to the 6-year capital improvement plans, which was attached in Exhibit A. Docket item 2202 is an update to the transportation element, accepting the recommendations from Quadco and replacing the reference to the 2008 non-motorized transportation plan with a reference to the active transportation plan. Docket item 2203 is an update to the facts, figures, and text where applicable to align with the recent housing needs assessment. Docket item 2204 is an edit to chapter 3, figure 13, removing a future minor arterial reference and adding the footnote to require dedication of right-of-way for development along a portion of Helena. Docket item 2205 is an amendment to the future land use designation for parcel 946133 to designate the property as community mixed use. I think that's all I have for the reading.
Okay. Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Ms. Henderson? Are there any motions? Actually, I should ask for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience tonight or online who would like to speak to this issue of comprehensive plan amendments? Seeing no one, now we're ready for a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move second reading adoption of ordinance 4910.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4910. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
I'll do roll.
Roll, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. Beauchamp,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow. Yes. David Miller.
Aye.
Monica Miller,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lilquist.
Yes.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington, amending the comprehensive plan adopted by ordinance number 4785 and set out in chapter 15.120 of the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we skip way ahead to page 150 for ordinance 4911, first reading for amendments to the city code section 9.92 utility fees.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Derek Mayo with the Ellensburg Public Works and Utilities Department. Before you tonight is reading of ordinance 4911, revising, as Nancy said, sections 9.92, 0.300, and 0.400 of the Ellensburg City Code. Back in 2006, City Council adopted and incorporated the Public Works Development Standards into Chapter 4, Title 4 of the City Code. These standards included a full chapter on permitting, outlining all permit fees associated with public works, water, and sewer permits. At that time, the majority of the code sections involving these fees were eliminated, with the exception of a few that remain for some reason. The proposed ordinance before you will remove the last remaining permit fees that are duplicated in the standards. And as part of that process, staff is reviewing update of the permits, the development standards and the permitting chapter. So we're trying to get this cleaned up so it's not in duplicating code sections. And there was one question regarding plant investment fees. that we're still proposing to leave that in the code, just because those are usually typically updated with cost of service and rates. And so we left that in there in the code specifically for that reason. So they're updated at the same time in the same location. They're included in the standard as reference, but it'll definitely be adopted or updated through council and code. With that, staff recommends council approve first reading of ordinance 4911 revising the said code sections, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Mayo? Does anyone in the audience or online wish to speak on this issue? Seeing no one, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, move first reading of ordinance 4911.
Second.
Motion and second for approval of first reading of ordinance 4911 revising Ellensburg City Code sections 9.92.300 and 9.92.400. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I too will vote aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to chapter 9.92 utility fee and credit schedules and amending sections 9.92.300 and 9.92.400 of the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. Next is 9C, a resolution for the allocation of the 2023 lodging tax fund.
Going to abstain from this. Do I do that now or after the motion?
Now would be
it's
great.
fine too.
Okay, because, yeah, because you can't participate in the discussion either.
Thank Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Heidi Barron Sternaway, your city manager. You have before you a resolution 2023-05 with the recommendation to adopt the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's recommendation through the consolidated process for events and activities in Ellensburg that attract tourists, and the total amount of $53,321.22. These grants have been through a rigorous process of evaluation. Again, we participate in a consolidated process that's operated and administered by the county that looks at requests for lodging tax spending for advisory, or excuse me, for events and tourism activities that bring heads to beds. And lodging tax, as a reminder, is a 4% additional room fee that folks pay when they stay in our community. And that money goes back to fund events and activities and tourism activities that bring more people to our community. And so this process again has been through the consolidated process, the recommendation, the total fund, the consolidated process was just over 310,000, and that's communities including Kittitas County and the smaller cities, including Ellensburg. And before you, you have a recommendation for 6 different activities: the Laughing Horse Arts Foundation, Kittitas Valley Event Center Patriot Night, Gallery 1, Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame, the Patch at Jensen Farms, and Junkteken in the Berg. And staff recommend that after discussion that council adopt the recommendation that was forwarded from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for this amount.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions regarding this issue? Does the lodging tax chair have anything to say?
And no, it was a kind of a grueling process going through all those applications, but I feel like we are satisfied with what we can.
Thanks. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak to the issue? Seeing no one, are there any motions?
Move resolution 2023-05.
Second. Motion and second for resolution 2023-05, adopting the distribution of the 2023 hotel motel tax fund grants. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I too will vote aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we are at 10A, public facilities funding discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Heidi Baron Sternaway, City Manager again. And this is a discussion item, and what we're asking for is some guidance from council on your interests. And there will be likely a number of actions to be taken depending on the direction you've provided. This is a continuation of the discussion from the joint study session with the county commissioners held on February 9th, where we hosted a discussion about public facilities funding, and particularly two public facilities we'd like some direction on. The first one I'll start out with is the rodeo event center, the Kittitas Valley Event Center and Rodeo Grounds. At the May study session, May 2022, representatives from the county and the rodeo board came to the city requesting a partnership. There's a significant amount of infrastructure in the grandstands that needs to be done. The funding amount needed to make those improvements early on had been in the $10 million. They figured that was in probably more the 14 million range and possibly more as we watch costs escalate. The request at the time was for the rodeo board and the county and the city to participate in fairly equal amounts to fund those improvements. The number at the time for debt service on those improvements, the city's share would have been roughly $250,000 a year in debt service. The city does have a history of participating in investment in the event center and grandstands. I believe it was the Legends Grandstand was the last one we participated in. Council at that time made a recommendation or paid off debt service in the amount of about $100,000 per year for 10 years for that investment. So there's been some history in partnership in the facility and maintaining and improving the facility. Council did at their, if I can remember, at their November study session and council meeting, talk about options for funding such a facility. And in your packet is a letter that was drafted and delivered to the county commissioners, and council's favorite option was to forego requesting the distressed county sales tax funds, or we call those the 0.09 funds. The county receives about $1.5 million, and those are set aside for economic development. And the council left the door open at that time for discussions about different revenues or advocacy to bring state funding or other options to help improve or achieve those improvements as a partnership. At the joint study session, the county commissioners shared an interest in not setting aside 0.09 funds across the top and having council revisit the idea of dedicating funds that would to help pay for debt service that didn't come out of a 0.09 system. And so that's the first item that we're here for today, is to talk through what some of those options may be. In addition, because a couple of the other item we talked about in particular at the joint study session was the Ellensburg Community Field House. With the loss of the field house, or excuse me, of the Racket and Recreation Center on December 2nd, council has discussed, and we've looked at a plan if we can fund to rebuild a facility at Rotary Park. And so we were looking to the county also to participate in some one-time funding for that facility. The number that we had calculated was a $6 million request from the county in one-time funds up front. And so our request is to make a formal request of the county for that funding, and then also to take some steps to discuss tonight, specifically council's interest in funding and options for funding for debt service for the rodeo grandstands at the Kittitas Valley Event Center. So I've delivered a couple things, and I'm going on a little bit longer than normal here tonight because this is a discussion item. We do have in front of you the lodging tax revenue since 2001. So essentially for the last 20 years plus. And this was at the end of December 2022. And if you see that there are some blank spots on the 2022 year, that is because lodging tax revenue comes in 2 months later. And so this is how we track it. And the reason we do this is that 13% of our lodging tax funds off the top go to fund the events that the activities you just approved through the consolidated process. And so that's an annual 13% of the previous year's funds are taken off the top. The second item I'd like to point out is that out of this fund, we pay for, we have a professional services agreement with the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce. And we have a 1-year agreement for $270,000 that helps support the marketing and tourism activities, including the Visitor Information Center. So that money also comes off of the top here. And so if council was looking for a $250,000 amount, that would essentially it would probably wipe out an annual amount of funding that comes in, depending on what we do, if those numbers stay the same with the 13% off the top and we continue to the trajectory for visitor center and tourism. The other item I'd like to point to is that if you look at 2020 revenues, we saw about a 39% drop. So when we know that these numbers are fairly elastic, and that's the first time we've seen a pretty significant drop like that, but we know that that can happen. So dedicating funding to debt service for a 10-year or a 15-year is a risk. And it also, so we need to take that into consideration. The second item is, or the second piece of this is that with lodging tax, your lodging tax advisory committee is really the mechanism to evaluate requests. And so if council is interested in moving forward with a discussion to fund debt service through lodging tax, that we would recommend it go back to the lodging tax advisory committee for a discussion and evaluation and come back to you for recommendation before we would talk with the county commissioners and commit to something. And I'm going to add one more item, and that is this last year in our budget, we did initiate new revenue. So the second quarter of the real estate excise tax. That money will begin to collect revenues in April. There's a lag time that happens. The estimated amount is about, depending on the economy, between the $300,000 and $400,000 per year. Council did dedicate that to parks funding. We have a lot of parks projects, including Reed Park, that we have set aside a little bit of that this next year to help fund some design. And but the commitment as we moved in to adopt that was to use that for parks and capital improvements as well. So looking from council for specific direction or interest on and potentially a top amount if lodging tax was the appropriate funding mechanism to fund debt service for the rodeo grounds, and looking at just at your general interest in as well.
Mr. Elliott.
So we're talking about a two-way exchange of money.
That is correct.
Potentially.
So
Money going to the county and money coming from the county to the city. So
That is
what's
correct.
the difference? What's the delta between those two? We're asking for 6 million from the county for the field house. What specifically or what roughly are they asking for us for the rodeo grandstand?
they're roughly asking for 4 million, and the 6 million is a one-time. The 4 million is essentially that about 12 million split 3 ways for debt service. So right now, interest rates probably for bond are about 6.5% is what our finance team told me at this point.
Wow, that's gone up.
So I guess my question then is there a way to just wash it and say, okay, they're asking for $2 million or we're asking for $2 million from the county? And because the reason I'm saying that is if we're both borrowing or potentially there's costs associated with this, there's cost in exchanging the money. Why don't we just call it good, let them fund their part, we fund our part, and we ask for 2 million for the field house? I get why that's not maybe a good idea, but I want to hear somebody smart tell me.
Mr. Why?
I believe it comes down to where the monies are coming from. Whereas like the lodging tax, where we can't use that for the field house, but we can use that for building an attraction at the rodeo grounds. So if we're committing the lodging tax funds of $250,000 a year to the county to build that project, their funds can be coming from their general fund.
We could use it for REIT and then reappropriate money. I guess what I'm saying is we're exchanging money and that costs something.
The difference is timing. I mean, our plan was not to bond for the field house. So it is a one-time upfront, short-term transfer of funds there. It's a long-term transfer from the city to the county. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we need the money in the next 2 years. They have some from their ARPA funds that they haven't allocated. That enough.
Correct.
So-
And if you recall, when Rotary Park was developed, the county made a one-time investment in Rotary Park as well. I believe it was for purchase of the property.
I think it was for
Somebody can
parking
correct me.
lots.
Parking lots.
I think they developed the parking lots.
I know there was.
But I wasn't sure if it was, when I was thinking about it, was that 0.09 money, which isn't really like theirs.
So on that one as well. So the reason they don't want us to commit the 0.09 funds is because of it's not guaranteed a certain amount.
So the 0.09, what I recall is the 0.09 funds, at this point still have a 10-year sunset. So I believe through 2032. And then the interest is potentially to start using those for investing in economic development initiatives and maybe looking differently. So a commitment to take an amount off the top to fund that for a long period of time was not the county's interest.
So what would happen if they said no to our parks, to the field house request? What would we do then? Do we have a alternative?
Stand out in the corner of the can.
So part of the funding formula is that they will partner to some degree, but we would have to recoup that with other funding sources, whether it be state or other local matches and a capital campaign as well.
What does a capital campaign look like for city government? Does that? like
Sometimes it's
with a par-
partnering
okay,
with
a
a
private
third
entity
party.
would help.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I think we could, I mean, it seems to me we could use some lodging tax for the field house just because it potentially could attract tourists with indoor soccer events or something like that. But trying to fund it all through I think doesn't pass the straight face test with the state auditors. But I think if we had to, we could dip into lodging tax for that as well. If we had any left over after we commit to 250,000 a year from.
I guess from my perspective, I don't really, I mean, I care where the money comes from and that it's used for its intended purposes and that we don't get sideways with the auditor. I care about those things. But I'd rather have staff tell us what the path of least resistance is in terms of, risk, in terms of fluctuation and those types of things. I think both projects need to be funded. I think they serve, different purposes. And so I'm interested in it. I'm, not really thrilled about, the bureaucracy that has people, right, exchanging money, because that comes at a cost. We're spending money to do this, but I'll support that process. I would rather you tell us, here's the cleanest way to do this. Here's the least impactful way to do it. And then I would tell you that I support that. I think if we sit up here, it's going to look like we're making sausage and I'm not interested in that.
I would also add, I think as part of our, and I would agree with what Councilmember Elliott just said, but I also think that I know we're quick to eliminate bonding as a preferred approach, but I think we need to understand what that would look like if we had to resort to that. That is the plan B or C or D, whatever that might be. Or maybe it isn't because it may not be feasible or something the community would support, but I think we need to know what that looks like.
Cause I think waiting in the wings is, I mean, the $25 million field house. It's understood, there's probably a 35 or $40 million community center with a pool behind this that is absolutely going to have to go to bond.
Yeah, that's right. I think all of that needs to be considered. It's not one project.
I don't want to borrow money until it's cheaper.
We may have missed that window. I guess my thought is, it seems safe to ask lodging tax to support 200,000 a year. And I think that there's flexibility in the marketing budget to adjust if for some reason we can't cover that amount for debt service. I understand that it constrains our ability to do our own capital projects out of that funding. I mean, but I would like to hear what the lodging tax folks feel are priorities, and you know, that committee's recommendation makes a difference. What do they think we could withstand? Would they be willing to commit to 250,000 a year and perhaps adjust the marketing budget if necessary? So I guess I'm in favor of sending it to the committee and having the discussion. Go ahead.
Basically just clarification on it. So if we did bring that to the lodging tax committee, is there a way of putting in a provision? So if we do end up having another pandemic like in 2020, where we dumped all the way down 39%, that we were able to adjust the number for that year, or even when we rebound back the next year at 46%, be able to make up that.
Correct. And typically, if you're making a commitment to pay debt service, you honor the debt service first, and you would adjust your service agreements as the mayor suggested. If there's a marketing adjustment that we can make in that budget, that would be the case. So. Yes, so what I'm hearing is take the discussion to lodging tax and figure out the threshold, and we can bring some better numbers back to you. And with that, I just want to, I appreciate, this is a discussion item. So typically we do these in a study session, so it's a little less formal. But I appreciate the offered opinions and opportunities here.
Is there a consensus making a formal request to the county for the field house for $6 million?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
One quick thing too, also, we have people in the community. Well, we have some of the community members here. The lodging tax is still looking for people.
Nice.
So if you want to join the commission, please.
Let's spend some money.
Perfect time. Jump in this forward.
Sorry. Yes. So, yeah, those people have to fall into one of two categories, right? So, but you're looking for both kinds of
We
people.
are. We only have 4 people on that council right now.
Both
Pride is
kinds, the
eligible.
givers and the receivers. Eh?
You're eligible for funds, the pride group.
Sure, the pride group is, yeah.
There's 3 people.
I was just clarifying that, and
It's not just every.
it's not just these people in the audience that we're talking to. Nancy.
So what would this, the recommendation that you've made, that our commitment to the county,
And the recommendation is to forward the request to the lodging tax commission for money to give to the rodeo for the rodeo arena, give to the county for the rodeo arena. The other piece of it is the request, sending a letter to the commissioners asking for $6 million for the field house. So there's the two pieces.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, obviously, we're not committing to anything at this point. in terms of the debt service for the rodeo arena, this has still got like 6 more steps to go through.
Absolutely. Yes, this is a conceptual discussion at this point.
Also recall that when I served on COG, whenever we were having conversations about how to divvy up the 0.09 money, it was clear and it was accepted that before any of the money was distributed out to the local governments, the county took a large chunk off the top to cover debt service for the rodeo, fair and rodeo ground. So that's been a common practice and it was a lot of money. So I'm not particularly excited about giving up the option of drawing on the 0.09 if that fits in at some point down the road. I know the county may not like it, but I still think we might want to keep that, reserve that option.
Yeah, or they can to fill in whatever holes they have in their
Yeah.
funding, but I think that the discussion is to look at that pot very differently than they have. in
Oh, I
the
understand that
past.
too.
So.
Yeah, but having said that, I don't believe there's a proposal to eliminate the debt service component of that 109 money to make the economic development activities whole, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And do you have what you need?
I do. Thank you, council.
So we are now at the city manager's report.
Excellent. Once again, Heidi Baron Sertaway, city manager. Just a reminder, Alex was kind enough to bring the flyers for the Streamside Landowners event on Thursday evening. Again, Hal Holmes Community Center. It begins at 5. We will have ECTV there taping the panel and presentation, so that will be documented and will run on the ECTV, I believe, YouTube channel as well. So you have that for the future. And the second thing is just a reminder that we're partnering with the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce to do a launch of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and even more importantly, a State of the Community address on March 7th. And our very own Mayor Lopez will be there, along with other mayors across the county and the county commissioner, talking about the opportunities and challenges in our communities. And so we'll think it'll be a great event. It is free. They are asking folks to sign up. We'll invite council, and if we need to, we can do a public notice for a potential meeting forum. And so everyone is invited, and stay tuned. We'll make sure you get a direct invitation for everybody. And then finally, you have 2 letters of support at the dais tonight. One is for the Ellensburg Downtown Association requesting a letter of support for a mural project grant they'd like to do in 2 phases. One is mural restoration of some of the Ellensburg rodeo murals. And the second is actually to create an Ellensburg mural, a postcard mural that would go on the side of a business. And so this is a grant through T-Mobile to help fund those activities. And that would be a request for the mayor's signature on that. And then secondly is a request from PSE, who has applied for some of the bipartisan infrastructure law funding and looking at a community resiliency grant. And if you recall, Puget Sound Energy, they do electric service around our community, and they're looking at a pretty significant investment across Kittitas County. And so staff would recommend or council approve the mayor's signatures on those items.
Madam Mayor, I move your signature on the PSE and mural project.
second.
Clarifying question real quick.
Sure.
Do they have a timeline for these murals?
For the murals, they are hoping to start this year as quickly as possible. And for the postcard, it is going to depend on their ability to fund that too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so motion and second for mayor's signature on the PSE letter and the mural letter that are before you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2 will vote aye, opposed. That motion carries.
That's all for me. Thank you.
That's all. Okay. So Councilmember Boshaw.
Developmental disabilities was canceled this month due to Valentine's festivities. Unfortunately, I had to miss the library meeting because it was a busy night at my personal business space on Valentine's. And so the library has been moving, not library, sorry, the Senior Activity Center has been moving forward on a restructuring of their fees and the scheduling of that, trying to make it more affordable for seniors who just come to maybe socialize and not use much of the activities. So that's kind of in the process right now. They did meet, if you remember me talking about the recycling goal, they did meet the 500 pounds of recycling. So they got the bench that they're thinking about dedicating to Ed and Shirley, who are avid members, and they did a ton of work to get that recycling done and have that goal met. And
So the bags I've been saving, I just throw away.
can
now.
donate, no, donate them somewhere else.
Where?
I don't know where, but
Okay.
don't throw them away.
Okay.
Recycle them.
Wow, you're the fish lady.
But yeah.
It's a stretchy plastic that the solid waste doesn't take.
Right. I do not know where you can recycle those, but yes, they did
Throw it in
meet
the
their
creek.
goal. So that one is.
Throw it in the
that-
creek.
Throw it in the creek.
Yeah.
So that is kind of where the senior center is at. I think that, yep, that's it.
They just need to start another project and save more for
They do. I'll talk to them.
another bench. Councilmember Elliott.
So attended centrifuge, CBDA. The most sort of relevant conversations are around the planning for electrical vehicles, infrastructure, and a project they're working on, which is an inventory of non-residential properties. And in that discussion, it became clear, at least from their perspective, and I might share some of that perspective, that our inventory of industrial and light industrial property is diminishing relatively quickly. And that we may want to sort of, I know staff is working on this, but we may want to stay tuned and begin to create some more opportunities, just in case that becomes a need in the community. Didn't attend planning because I had to go to the county meeting. But he vetoed my presence. And then attended a crisis housing meeting here last week, which was a little bit didn't really have any significant outcomes, but this is a conversation to potentially leverage some of the recently passed mental and behavioral health sales tax money towards establishing some level of not residential facility, but stabilization or recliner beds and to deal with mental and behavioral health, fairly low acuity in the community rather than shipping them off as far as Idaho we're doing right now. We didn't really come to any actionable items at that point, other than maybe some secure transport, but that's still a work in progress. And finally, the animal shelter was at a really low for dogs in particular, so that's cool.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Councilmember Goodloe.
Yeah, I attended the Homeless Affordable Housing Commission meeting. We had a DEI commission meeting, and the COG had a meeting this past week, or I guess it was last week. And I think the region concept of the regional discussion, or regionalizing COG around is going on. We saw a presentation for Thurston County, a model that they use for that. It's been very successful for them for a number of years. We're going to look at another model next month. I forgot where that's coming from. Yakima has regionalized. So we're going to look, I have somebody come and present on that one, but there seems to be, I think, an overall support of the members to do something like this here in this county. So we'll keep you posted on that. I've become involved with the CW Ethics Lab Human Library project as part of the DEI mission partnership with that project. Human Library Project is a really fascinating project that started in Denmark. It's an international program, and the whole concept is that the books in the library are people. So we are looking for people who have interesting stories that they'd like to share. You can apply online at the CW Ethics Lab if you would like to be involved with this. The process would be fill out the application, and we have a team of 3 people that have a short interview with you, and then we recommend the books to the international office, and they are the ones that approve them. Once you become a book, you can participate in human libraries all over the world as a result of this international connection. So I would encourage anybody listening or anybody in the audience, if you have a good story or something that's really a passion of yours that you'd like to share with other people, you might be interested in applying for this. We hope to have the first human library event in April, I believe, if we get enough books. And it will be held at Hal Holmes. We'll have about 8 or 10 tables set up. All the books have titles, and it'll be marketed, and you'll see information on it. And so for a couple of hours on April 22nd, I think is the target date, you can go to Hal Holmes and you can check out a book and talk with that person and about anything you want to do, talk about that's related to what they're doing. So it's fascinating. I think it's going to be a really good project. The CW Library is also participating in this. And then the only other thing I have to report is AWC is at the Association of Washington Cities, is putting together a DEI cabinet. That would be a statewide group who would meet on a regular basis to help cities who are working with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and provide resources and support, and keep AWC informed of the progress that is being made there. So I applied and was selected to be a part of that cabinet. And then from our region also is another individual from Titan that will be representing us. So it seems there are lots and lots of cities across Washington that are working on this kind of thing, and it's like nobody's ever done this before. So how can we help each other? And so the state association is getting involved with that.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Miller.
Let's see, so I attended the Finance Committee meeting, a portion of it, due to my own self-inflicted scheduling problems. But the main takeaway was the finances of the city are good. They're looking good. The 2022 numbers, year-end numbers came in. We always take our finance department takes a very, I would say, conservative approach in our budgeting, and the actual numbers exceeded expectations in terms of revenues, and our expenses were under control as well. So strong indicators, I think, on our general financial health. And then today I attended the PTAC Transit Advisory Committee meeting, and it's actually an exciting time on PTAC. There's been some change over with Councilmember Tab stepping out, and several other members, maybe some of the charter members of the group have moved on. So Betsy Dunbar has been working to try to, frankly, to maintain a quorum. It's been a challenge. So we now have 2 newly seated members and another strong applicant we interviewed today. So but the quality of the applicants is exceptional. They bring a lot of unique experience, and I think it's it's energizing, I think, to see in the group. Also, I was just going to share, one of the other things we went through today, just briefly, was we looked at the activity for the ridership numbers. So for 20, just as a top number, what happened with Central Transit's numbers during the pandemic happened, pretty much mirrored what happened in the community. So the numbers dropped sharply in 2020 and 21, but 2022 are almost back to 2019 numbers within about 2%, which I think is pretty good. But so I think that kind of indicates that we're sort of back where we started. But the encouraging number also is that the January 2023 numbers just came in, and they were 46% higher than January 2022. So strong growth in ridership. So I think we're seeing a lot of good things coming out of transit. So that's it.
Councilmember Monica Miller.
I attended the same finance meeting that David Miller did, all of it.
The whole thing.
Same takeaways.
Somebody had to.
And I had to miss the Parks and Rec and Landmarks and Design meetings that happened last 2 weeks. So I have nothing else to report.
Councilmember Wynn.
Most of my meetings were canceled or rescheduled. The next Law and Justice one is actually tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. There was an issue with getting it posted, didn't make it a legal meeting, but I think we have that rectified. So that is all I have.
Utility advisory was also canceled. Like no one wants to work in February or. I did attend a coffee with council with Councilmember Elliott, and so all of the questions were about fire and fire service. Because he was
The fire station
in his uniform. So, but we also heard a presentation about the mini trains. So, but that was a nice, nice group of folks at Prestige, and have attended one meeting with congressional staffers looking for funding for the field house today and one tomorrow. So Heidi is spending a lot of time looking for money for the field house, I think. So high priority project. And that is all I have. Anything else? The good of the order? If not, we are adjourned.